Eileo guys, and welcome back. In today's video though, I wanted to talk about the top 5 Nat3's in my opinion that beginner players should have, and also if you're like a mid-game player, you should also have these mons. If you're in-game, probably not. But right before I get into the video, I do want to give a quick shout out to Odin. Odin also does MSO YouTube content if you guys haven't checked him out yet, because I 100% stole this idea from him, and yeah, I just want to give credit where credit's due for the idea. But let's go ahead and get right into it here. Alright, so we're coming in hot with number 5 here, you guys. It's going to have to be Wood Minicat for me. There's like 100% no doubt in terms of a Nat3. Beginner players, even mid-game, and of course in-game players even have for Titans. He's just super duper useful. He's super duper easy to build, and not only can you use him in Titans, but you can also use him in the Dimensional Dungeon. And as a Nat3 that is extremely common to have, it's like no excuse as to why you shouldn't be rocking a Wood Minicat. With him having exposed weakness and attack up, I'm not saying that you should be running like Golem's B7, but if you were to run it and you do pick up a Minicat along the way, that's perfectly fine and acceptable until you can move on to higher tiers of content. But he just has a great lead in general, and not to mention his whole kit with it supporting damage from your courageous strikers if you just begin the game, which is the harder hitting mons for Titans, is just something that you can't really replace. Like, it is just the bread and butter, especially for your water Titan teams, much like water cure is like the bread and butter for fire Titan teams, or if you do have dark enders and stuff of that nature for hitting light or possibly dark Titan. But yeah, he has a really good lead here. Once again, I stated that he could be used in the dimensional dungeons. He could also be used if you just need to use him period because of his decreasing defense lead. If you have to, you can use him in Colossus because he can help boost up the damage of your courageous strikers if they're too weak, and also just boost up the damage in general of your whole entire squad for that. So definitely, especially if you're interested in Titans, I would try to pick up at least 2 of these guys, get them to Evo 3, get them booked up, and throw them on the left lane. But he, of course, is number 5 on my list, and he is well worth being on this list. Alright then, we have number 4 here, which is going to be Water Sand Wraith. Now this may be surprising, this may not be surprising, but I know you can farm out Fire Sand Wraith in his required area, or his area which I think is like deserted battlefield and stuff like that. So he's a little bit later in the game, especially for beginners, but he's still a really good mon to have. Number 1, because even though he's not a courageous striker, this is your first accessible mon in terms of like unflinching strike without you talking about like Nat4s and stuff of that nature. He has a really decent lead, and while Vengeance isn't super duper like amazing in itself, the main selling point though is just him being an unflinching striker that you can easily build, because if you pull one through eggs, which you're pretty much guaranteed to pull it through eggs, you can Evo 3 him through farming out the story anyways. You can also get him variant so you can get that lovely death blow lead. And the reason why he's on his list is because there's a couple of different areas you can use him in. Obviously, if you don't have anything else in terms of hitting like Fire Titan and you just begin the game, you can farm out a couple of these guys, get them to Evo 3, take them up to 60 until you get something better. You could run 4 of these guys. Am I saying that it's the best way to do things? Absolutely not. But it does get your foot into the game until you can sacrifice mons and pull a Harley, or eventually phase these guys out and replace them with an Acer. But even then, unless they're variant, you're still going to miss out on possible damage because of that lack of death blow lead. Not to mention, the biggest selling point for me here isn't so much Titans for him, even though he's an easy Titans mon to build, because his damage caps out super duper quick in Titans because of unflinching strike, is going to be Colossus. Like, if you're going to go into Colossus, I think, what is it, Fire Colossus is one of the easier ones, not the easiest. I think light or dark is probably honestly the easiest depending on your gem quality, especially as a beginner player. But for Fire Colossus, I'm not saying that he can solo, but if you run his lead, you make sure that he can crit, dude be over there the swinging, he be whooping Fire Colossus butt. So he's another good mon that I think every beginner should have just to get your feet wet in content. And once again, he's farmable, so even if you invest in him, it's not like you're losing out on much because you have something to substitute until you get something better. But yeah, that's number 4. And number 3 shouldn't be a surprise to anyone at all for this list. It's going to be the Mowglis, not just Fire Mowgli, but all the Mowglis in general. If you're lucky enough to start MSO around the time that Mowglis are out, then you're in a very good spot because you can pick up light and dark Mowgli. If not, you can pull the RGB Mowglis through eggs. And while Mowgli like drops off fairly quickly, especially as a beginner player, I feel like just having her in general is super duper useful because all the Mowglis essentially have the same skills, just different stats, which aren't that amazing. Even though there's a light and dark versions which are Nat4s, it still isn't that amazing. As a beginner player, you don't really have resources to invest in all types of Nat4s and getting Nat5s up to 60, etc. Meanwhile, you pull in dozens of Mowglis. Why not Evo 3 a Mowgli of an element that you're lacking in? Most players as they begin the game, they lack in hard-hitting wood mons, and you could pick up a wood Mowgli to do your damage. Now, I'm not saying that Mowgli is hard-hitting, but having a wood mon, especially paired it with your wood Minicat, if you're farming B7 for a month, depending on how much you play, that's still better than 0 mons at all. I mean, yes, there's also like Wood John, but once again, that's a Nat 4. If you're looking for a cheap, easy, and common Astromon to build as a Nat 3, also books, you have Mowglis. But once again, if you have nothing to go for those elements, it's better to have something here and use that even if it's not optimal, just to get you into the next part, just until you can build up Nat 5s and get your gems situated to kind of fill out your roster more. So don't be sleeping on the Mowglis. Alright, and then coming in the number 2 slot, you guys, is going to have to be Sea Star. Most specifically, it's going to be like Fire and Water Sea Star, just because both of those mons once again are fairly common from eggs, and you can get them to Evo 3 without fairly much of an issue, just because of how common that they are, and they're both useful in their own individual rights. So we have Water Sea Star here. I used to be Team Water Miho, but with Water Sea Star's like not so recent, but with her update, honestly, she is better than Water Miho just because her saps are more potent. If Water Sea Star is rocking, what is that, 2 times sap? Yeah, it's 2 times sap, obviously booked up. 2 times sap, that goes to 70% for 2 turns. If those 2 saps stick, then they're going to out DPS Water Miho. Not to mention, she just has better base stats than Water Miho. And if you're feeling froggy, like I've seen in past account reviews, you can actually super Evo her. I'm not saying that you have to. I'm not saying that I recommend it. But I've seen people super Evo their Water Sea Star and bring her into Golem's B11. So they can use her, you know, raise her up while they're doing B8. They can use her in B10. They're using her in B11. I'm sure there's people out there using her in B15 just because she's an easy sapper to build. And as a newer player, getting your hands on a decent sapper is super duper important because, well, spoiler alert, when you're not farming out PvE and you're not doing Titans, you're going to be doing golems. You're going to be doing a lot of golems. And while wave clearing is a good way to get through waves, there comes a point in time where wave clearing isn't enough because the golem has 355 bazillion HP. So you're going to need your sappers here, because what sappers do is basically apply a debuff on the enemy, and it shaves off 7% of that monster's maximum HP once that sap sticks. Sapping is very, very important for this game, especially if you're new to it. So if you have the option to build it, I would build Water Sea Star over Water Miho at this point. That's just how it is. Water Sea Star is superior even with her higher base stats and lower chance of her sap sticking, but if it does stick, it's going to out damage Water Miho, like no questions asked. And the same thing with Fire Sea Star here. While only has use inside the Nat 3 league, which is when Nat 3 mons and lower get a stat boost, that's still an easy way for you to kind of get into PvP and see if you really like it or not without investing too much. So even if your gem quality isn't super duper amazing, if it's acceptable, you should still be doing decently in the Nat 3 league once that comes around with your Fire Sea Star, depending on what your team composition is, which once again, these are fairly common mons to build. They're fairly easy to book, so it's not like you're investing too much into having these mons, especially as a beginner player. And alright, you guys, for number 1, no surprise here once again, is going to have to be Water Mona. Water Mona, I mean, she's part of the hero quest for beginners, which is the game telling you, hey, you should get Water Mona and get her to Evo 3 ASAP. I mean, it's without a doubt, it's no surprise to anyone that Water Mona is number 1 on this list, especially for beginners. Yeah, because essentially as a newer player, the game is telling you, hey, you need to build Water Mona and get her to Evo 3 ASAP. If you can get her level 50, get her level 50. If not, if you can do 60, do 60, because she's going to be your bread and butter for a decent time in the game. because Pagos Coast, which is where she's from, is a very like noob friendly place to farm out Astromon, just because all of the mons are one element and they're just weak to water, if I'm recalling correctly. And that's where a lot of grinding happens. That's where you're going to get some not so good gems, but gems good enough to hopefully clear out B8. And that's probably where you're going to end up getting your Mona up to level 50 or 60, as you like stop and kind of gem her up, get her booked up, get her to Evo 3, etc. So Water Mona shouldn't be any surprise to anyone here, because after she gets built up there in Pagos, then you're going to slide over there to Golems B8, and that way you have a way to not only earn gold to help build up your other mons, but you're going to also earn gems to help build up your other mons. So it's just like a cornerstone of MSL. Like, there's no passing up Water Mona. I'm not saying that she is the greatest mon in the world. I do feel like she drops off very heavily after B8, but if you had to, you could use her in B10 until you got something better. But newsflash here, the game also slides you a Dark Mona if you just began the game here. So you eventually just not replace Water Mona, like you can still keep her in your box and use her wherever you may need her at, but she's just going to be outdated with the more and vastly superior Dark Mona. But at the end of the day, it's just advice. But yeah, that's pretty much it, you guys. Those are my top 5 Nat3's that beginner players should have, and obviously some of these you're just going to use for the rest of the game anyways, so why not go ahead and kind of prep out and fill things out for right now, because if you're going to keep playing and enjoying the game, you might as well invest early. That way you can move on to bigger and better investments. But feel free to leave in the comments below about what you guys think your personal top 5 Nat3 players that beginners should have. Is there a mon that I'm missing out on? Is there any honorable mentions you guys want to also have here, so that once other people click on a video and check it out, they can also see it in the comments below? And yeah, that's pretty much it, you guys. See ya.